Education Services, and today I am lucky enough to be here with Tania Gomez. Tania is a successful business owner, leader, and certified auditor with a passion for helping clients achieve real business results. Now, Tania has two businesses. She has Tania Gomez Consulting and Strawberry Solutions. With a background in education and experience in government-regulated sectors, Tania has been instrumental in guiding NDIS and education providers through the complexities of regulatory compliance and quality assurance. Join us as we delve into Tania's journey from founding her first charity at 21 to leading innovative consulting firms and making an impact in the disability sector. Welcome, Tania.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. So great to be here.
You're very welcome. So I did go and take a look at your profile, and I saw that your first business, so at 21, you started a not-for-profit charity helping mums to access childcare. So is that kind of is that what brought you into the RTO sector? Can you give us a little bit of a history of where you started out from and what kind of brought you into the vet sector?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my life in childcare as a childcare worker, and then I became an early childhood teacher, and I started my first business. My first business was a for-profit business that was a babysitting and a nanny agency, and that grew to 1,000 staff in 4 cities by the time I was 27. And as part of that, I started working with the very elite and rich and famous in Sydney. I worked at a school, at the International Grammar School in Sydney at the time, as a childcare worker and then an early childhood teacher. And then I was a special needs teacher working with children with disability. The International Grammar School has a lot of very wealthy families, such as Hugo Weaving's kids and Kate Blanchett's kids, and it's an art school, and lots of other very wealthy people. And as part of that, I was asked basically to start babysitting and nannying people inside and outside of school time. One client needed 6 babysitters for a period of time to go to Noosa for their annual vacation with about 20 of his closest business partners, and asked me to source that. And that became a business. He then moved to Melbourne, and so did my business. And then he asked me to set up in Canberra, and then we set up in Perth. But as part of that, being a young girl, I was earning a lot of money, and I became a little bit of a brat. I kind of started chasing money as opposed to chasing purpose. And at that time, my godmother, who raised me, got diagnosed with cancer. And we were sitting in a chemo ward in Melbourne, and I was playing on my BlackBerry thinking I was so cool. And a baby came in, a mother came in with a baby and asked me to hold the baby while she had her needle put into her arm. And my godmother said, "Put that BlackBerry down, and you've become a brat," something to that effect, "and now you need to actually solve a purpose, and this is the problem I want you to solve. I never want to see another baby in a chemo ward." So I did what she said, and I spent the next 2 years of my life setting up a charity, and we ended up partnering with the Cancer Council and supporting about 400 mums, giving them free childcare, subsidised by the Cancer Council, to help them while they went through cancer treatment and diagnosis. Then the funding for the Cancer Council ran out. The only way to exit from the program was for the parents, mostly mums, to pass away. And when my godmother passed away, that all became really triggering for me, and it was really hard. I did do a lot of PR. I won a whole lot of awards. I actually mortgaged my house at 27, and used that money to go to PR agency, and I used that to set up. I got quite a few big grants or big sponsorship by people like dairy farmers, National Foods, and that kept the business going for about a year longer. But then there was really no way to help those mums, and we went from being a paid service. We ended up setting up as a volunteer service to keep it running. We did everything that we possibly could, but then I found this tiny little bucket of funding called in-home care funding back then, and transitioned all of my families across to this organisation. And I was already teaching the Cert 3 and Diploma of Early Childhood on weekends and evenings as what was, paying my bills while I set up my business. And the organisation that took over my family's, they had they owned childcare centres, they owned an RTO, and they owned a large disability organisation. So I transitioned to working for them. They took my families in their disability service or their in-home care service. I then ran their RTO for 8 years, and but I had previously worked on RTOs on and off while I was studying in different things as another way of receiving income. And yeah, I grew in that RTO for 7 years and did every kind of thing possible. That was vet fee help days. So there was, we grew the college quite a lot. We set up campuses transnationally in different countries. We set up campuses across Australia, and we did all funding buckets. So I got really used to funding contracts, and we became a CRICOS provider as well. So I played in that space for a while. And then when the NDIS rolled out, the organisations, I sat on their board for 8 years and helped them transition to the NDIS. And then when I was looking to leave that organisation, because I'd been there for 8 years and had a bit of the 7-year itch, and it was time for me to do something new, I then helped. I basically went out to, I sat on the ACPET then, New South Wales board, and knew all of the business owners in Sydney that owned RTOs, and basically said to all of them, look, I'm pregnant with my 3rd child, but I have 9 months. I've resigned from my job. I've got 9 months I can do things. And they all just gave me projects. And so that's where Strawberry Solutions started. I said yes to all of those. And the main things that came out of that, I can do anything for you for 9 months, was a lot of e-learning, a lot of RTO compliance, and a lot of NDIS applications. And so out of those things, I can do RTO compliance, but it's not my joy. So I said no to that and referred all that work to other colleagues of mine. Strawberry Solutions then became an e-learning provider, and then I started Provider Plus, which was which has registered 8,000 providers, 53% of all NDIS providers under Provider Plus. And 12 months ago, I sold my shares in Provider Plus to start Tania Gomez Consulting. And Strawberry Solutions has been going all of this time, about 8 years, developing e-learning. It's run by an amazing team. I don't work in that business. I am an owner of that business, but mostly work in the NDIS space, but still heavily in training as far as what the NDIS needs is to know how to do things and skills.
And then on top of that, because you weren't busy enough, you decided to have yet one more child and also enroll yourself in a PhD.
Yeah, well, I am a teacher at heart. And so for me, it's all about education and learning. I like to do things and learn things and feel like I'm mastering things. So I have 12 qualifications. I haven't stopped studying since high school. I've studied every year except for one. After having my 3rd son, I had a year off. So I did a master's degree, multiple postgraduate degrees, have many vet qualifications, as you do when you work in the vet space, and know the RPL system well. And then, yeah, I started doing a PhD about 12 months ago, looking at the difference. How do we make it easier for small and medium businesses to comply and understand how to work in government regulated spaces?
And I mean, you work across quite a lot of government regulated spaces. Are there, I mean, in the people that you work with that are really successful in what they do, are there are there like similarities? Are there common themes in relation to like what they do and how they approach things?
Yeah, well, that's literally what I'm researching in my PhD, is why are businesses successful, and what's success to begin with? Are we talking about money, or are we talking about setting up your business because you're passionate about something and meeting that passion? Are we talking about flexibility around family? So what is success first? And then, is it based on your skills and traits as a person? Or is it just you're really good at your job? Or are there outside factors like the actual political or policy frameworks you work within? So I'm going to spend the next 7 years trying to find the answer to that. But I do think there's a lot of commonality between who's successful. And yeah, that's just my observations, is that it's really around who can manage this volatility of working with government. The changes that happen so frequently, this uncertainty that you live within. And some people really thrive in that, and they really love the change, and they really love, working in a government regulated space that has some level of security as far as investment and funding goes. But with that investment goes the uncertainty that you don't have a lot of control, and you get, thrown around a lot. In my master's degree, I actually had a look, I did research around what were successful, what were the challenges for VET leaders, specifically around the vet fee help time with all of the changes. And so there's a lot of similarities in what I can see of the challenges of VET leaders to the challenges of NDIS leaders. So I'm hoping in my PhD I can take some of the learnings for what have RTOs learnt as a much more mature sector, and how can we then help other sectors like NDIS, and also aged care is going through a big reform starting in July next year, and they'll have more small and medium businesses entering a very government regulated space who don't know how to operate. How do we create something, and how do we help them to really do better? And I think why I'm so driven to understand why that is I truly believe that the vast majority of providers, whether they're RTOs, whether they're aged care, whether they're NDIS, really want to do a great job. They just don't know how. They don't understand how to demonstrate compliance. They don't understand what the expectation is. And so if we can actually make it easier for them to understand what's required, then by default, you'll get better outcomes for the people using the services.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Part of me looks at it and goes, I think education and any of the care sort of related services, they are very much people focused. And I guess that, and people focused tends to, I think, like bring on a lot of, have a higher percentage of female staff, female owners, female managers, things like that. And because broadly speaking, from like a psychology term, we are very focused on, on the human element, on the emotional element and things like that, and responding to people and taking care of the needs of people, that's a slightly different subset than, what we would traditionally think of for a strong operating and business and financial mindset. Like there's a little bit of a clash between those two things. And so, in the research that you had done in and around that kind of vet fee help time, I think that, one of the interesting things for me at that point was there really the small number of providers that really screwed up the sector and the reputation of the sector at that particular point in time. It did come with like a very strong business financial success focus, right? Yeah. Without a focus, with a complete lack of focus on people and and the outcomes at that particular level. Were some of the findings from that reflective of really people coming into the sector that didn't maybe necessarily fit that framework of operating human-centered businesses?
I think coming in with human-centered businesses is what is needed, but you equally need the business acumen to run a business. And so I see a lot of challenges that the business is failing not because they're not trying to do the right thing, and not because the support or the care isn't great, but it's actually failing because they don't understand their P&L, and they don't understand cash flow forecasting, and they don't understand the implications or the seriousness of the requirements or the compliance, where RTOs do seem to do that better in the vast majority of cases. I think just like vet fee help, I think, I haven't looked at the research for a while, but when I was heavily involved in RTOs, it was around 5,000 RTOs. We have 200,000 NDIS providers. So you have like a huge amount more, but also the education level of RTOs, if you're running an education business, you tend to be educated, where a lot of NDIS providers are support worker level. They've been support workers and now they're establishing their own businesses. So you have a challenge there of even being able to read the government documents. Like I haven't done the research into this, but a colleague of mine researched the level, the AQF level that you would need to navigate the NDIS as a participant, a person with disability, and it was a master's level or higher. If you have a look at what the standard would be for the providers, I would say it would have to be a master's level or higher just in what you're expected to read and understand. And so if you've got a level 3 qualification and you're expected to read at a master's level already, it's just too hard.
And so do you think that, I mean, like, so for example, when we look at ASQA as a regulator, they do spend a lot of time trying to produce materials, documentation, run training sessions. You know, you have organizations like VELG, you know, the vast majority of consultants putting out lots of video content. So therefore, you know, we're able to take a lot of that content that you might need a master's to understand and disseminate it down to, you know, your AQF, you know, your AQF 4, AQF 5 sort of a level, so that we're able to support the sector. And it's just that because it is, I mean, really realistically, relatively a new sector, there hasn't been the time for either the regulator or the industry to be able to produce enough supporting content for that support.
Definitely. I think it's definitely part of it. I think because it's a brand new regulator as well, like the regulator was only established in 2019, right? So that's not long ago. The regulator doesn't yet see their role as educator. They see their role as regulator, which at the moment is just regulating, and they don't educate. If you call them and say, but what does this mean? They say, we're not a consultant. And then you've got the questionable consultants in the space who are giving information that benefits them and making you buy more things, as opposed to actually explaining how to comply. We also have the other framework that in ASQA, you have the regulator directly auditing you and regulating you. Yes, through, you know, sometimes it's panel auditors, but you have you're talking to the regulator, which has a level of not superiority, but of weight behind it. It's, you know, when you're audited by the regulator, you want to get that right. You take it seriously. It's a serious process. In the NDIS space, we have approved quality auditing bodies who are have a tender with the regulator to do third-party audits. And so it's a commercial arrangement where you pay a third-party auditor. There's 19 auditing bodies and there's no calibration between them. And so because of that, it really depends on the individual auditor on the day. If you have a hard or a soft, let's call it, audit, there's no calibration, there's no, you can't imagine what audit or prepare for the audit. And it also can be very casual in approach. If you have an auditor who just wants to tick and flick you, I think that that's a very different process than having a regulator directly. Also, providers don't always take it very seriously. They feel like they've paid for the audit and they've paid a third party, therefore I paid you to pass me. And I audit in that space for auditing bodies, and very often you're like, yeah, but you didn't pay me to pass you, you paid me to audit you, and I'm here to assess you against the standards, that's it. So I think having the regulation one step outside really changes the dynamic. And then the auditing bodies also can't consult, and so then you have the auditors underneath the auditing bodies who are all contractors, independent contractors, are then the consultants in the space. And there's a variety of quality in that. And you have people who've been through one audit, become a consultant and give advice that's completely incorrect. But the big problem with all of that, I think that happens in every sector, but I think what's the real problem there is that everyone just focuses on passing audit and passing that ticker box. They don't actually focus. There's no incentive to actually build quality. It's build compliance. And they almost have, you know, and this did happen in RTOs, I have seen also, but it's like, here's my files for audit and here's how I operate, and let's manufacture our audit stuff, as opposed to let's just be compliant and operate compliantly. There's also no risk of unannounced audits. So you engage an auditor, you set the audit date, you know when that's happening. So you can control those things, as opposed to, you know, I used to have ASQA turn up in vet fee help days unannounced very often and have to show them my records right then and there. And that drives this culture of having everything, you know, dotted and I's crossed and I's dotted and T's crossed at all points in time.
Well, and interestingly, ASQA has started doing that again, particularly within the cryo sector. But it's something that didn't happen during the kind of COVID years. We had this very different approach to regulation, but in the last like 3 or 4 months, ASQA is making very regular spot checks visits with international providers, and it does change, and it's look, I mean, I do feel for regulators in some ways, because it is this incredible balance of having an education, being able to provide education and being able to provide good clarifying materials, but also just making sure that there's that like little dose of the fear of God, right? I feel like it's akin to being like the parent to like a 6-year-old who is smart enough to know, mum and dad love me and their job is to kind of help me learn and build and grow. But also, if I push it past that point, I'm going to get sent to my room without dinner, or I'm going to get a smack up the backside, or do you know what I mean? Like it's that really, really delicate balance.
Yeah.
And how you do that as a regulator, like I do, I probably, I cop it a little bit. I cop it quite often for like, why are you so, supportive? But I do I feel like it is such a really, really tricky balance. And I know that across a lot of other industries, for everything that we complain about within the vet space, when you look internationally across vet, and when you look across the education, sector across Australia as a whole, we actually do have, like it is actually really interesting the quality of the outcomes that we can get from our sector when we do things really, really well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
All right, cool. Well, we are going to take a really quick break, and then we're going to come back, and I do want to speak to you all about Strawberry Solutions and what you guys are doing in that space. So guys, if you want to follow Tania, we have all of the links down in the comment section below. If you do have questions, by all means, post them there, and I will try and respond as quickly as possible. We will also have all the details of where you can find Tania's websites and following her on LinkedIn. Guys, my name is Lauren Hollow. I am here for NOI Education Services, and we will be back in just a few minutes.